Now I'm going to talk about the environmental impacts of factory farming. We often look at environmental health and human health, or public health, as separate issues. In reality, though, they're inextricable, like one of those trick pictures seen here, where, depending on how you're looking at it, only appear to be two different images. The difference is an illusion generated by the mind. Fact is, if you mess with the image of the old lady, you'll also damage the image of the young lady because, of course, they're the same thing. In a similar way, we're not separate from the environment. We are the environment. We can't pollute our air and water and food without literally polluting our own bodies and health. Let's take a look at how this plays out with regards to factory farming. Animal agriculture is one of the single most destructive industries on the planet. This might come as a surprise. How could old MacDonald be so bad? I'm going to walk you through it. Remember, there are 10 billion animals bred and killed every single year in the US. That's how many animals it takes for 300 million plus Americans to eat meat every day, often with every meal. Most of the environmental problems stem from this sheer number of animals, living, breathing, eating, pooping animals. All of those 10 billion animals require lots of food. If you've ever been to the Midwest, you know that what used to be forest and prairie and marsh is now just corn and soy as far as the eye can see. All of those crops are not being grown to feed to people, they're being grown to feed to animals on factory farms. Meat production requires more food than it creates. We have to feed the animals much more food to grow them and raise them than the amount of food we get from eating them. 83% of the calories we grow in this world end up as 18% of the calories we consume. Why? Because most of the food we grow is fed to animals, and animals are a really inefficient source of food. Think about it. For every 100 calories a cow eats, you only get 3 when you eat her. What happens to the other 97 calories? She burns them to live, just like we do. She has to use those calories to grow fur, teeth, eyes, hooves, digest her food, keep her body warm, and her heart beating. And interestingly, much of it goes to her staying conscious. Right now, somewhere between 20 to 60% of your calories are going to your being conscious. So instead of consuming those 100 calories ourselves, we're feeding them to animals. As this graph shows, we feed them 100 calories of corn and soy and only get out about 7 calories of milk, 13 calories of eggs, 12 calories of chicken, 10 calories of pork, or 3 calories of beef. That means we're wasting lots of land, energy, and food. In fact, a recent study found that if everyone around the world ate half as much meat and we used all of that farmland to grow fruits, vegetables, and legumes to feed directly to people rather than growing corn and soy to feed to animals on factory farms, we could feed every single person on Earth today, plus an extra 2 billion people. There's a lot of talk about how we're going to feed the growing global population, and a critical part of the answer is eating more efficiently by eating lower on the food chain. All of this animal feed requires huge amounts of land. It's a leading cause of deforestation in the Amazon. You might have seen the articles about the terrible fires destroying the Amazon across Brazil. Most of these fires were started by farmers and ranchers who want to clear the land to graze beef cattle or grow corn and soy to feed to animals on factory farms. Our taste for meat is wreaking havoc with ecosystems and wildlife. In the last 40 years, the Earth lost half of all its wildlife as habitat is destroyed to making grazing land for free-range cattle and for feed crops for animals. Wild animals now make up only 4% of all mammals on Earth, while just over a third are humans and 2/3 are livestock. If all wild terrestrial mammals climbed on the biomass scale together, the world's cattle would still outweigh them by 16 times. We're turning the earth into one giant feedlot. When you hear people talk about the issue of overpopulation, the biggest problem is the overpopulation of livestock. As you can imagine, keeping thousands of animals confined in their own filth makes a perfect breeding ground for bacteria and viruses. The animals are stressed out, so it's easier for them to get sick. And then once they do get sick, it's easy for that bacteria or virus to spread to the thousands of other animals. There are also people coming into contact with these sick animals and their waste. And sometimes the bacteria or virus is able to jump from animals to people. That's what happened with swine flu, which is thought to have started at Smithfield Pork Factory Farm. The final problem with all of this corn and soy and all the animals it feeds is that it requires tremendous amounts of water. When we think about ways to save water, what comes to mind? Some people might say taking shorter showers. Well, it turns out you can save the same amount of water by skipping 1 gallon of milk or a month's worth of showers. I think everyone would prefer that you shower. The same is true for meat. Switching from a hamburger to a veggie burger just once saves as much water as not showering for a whole month. It's the single most effective way we can save water on a daily basis. A lot of people ask about the water footprint of almonds because there have been articles about how water intensive almond milk is. The New York Times made a great infographic looking at the carbon, land, and water footprints of different types of milk. You can see that cow milk is far more resource intensive than any of the plant-based milks. So you're saving land, carbon, and water by switching from cow to almond milk. If you really want the absolute lowest footprint possible, you might consider switching to oat milk. So all of those antibiotics, pesticides, GMO crops, and water are fed to these 10 billion animals. It goes through their systems and comes out as poop. Farmed animals in the US produce 50 times as much waste as the entire US human population. Imagine if every man, woman, and child in the US peed and pooped into giant pits all year round. And that's what you have on factory farms. So what happens to all of this poop? That's what we'll see in this next 4-minute video.
One of America's biggest secrets is that farms practically don't exist anymore. The animals we eat are grown inside giant hidden factories. Since 2012, I've been secretly planning a project to expose these factory farms using the highest tech spy equipment available. Drones. This video provides just a sample of what I saw during only a few days of filming. You're looking at a lake of toxic pig feces and urine, the size of 4 football fields. That's because thousands upon thousands of pigs are inside of these buildings. Their waste falls through slats in the concrete floor, and it's flushed directly into this giant open-air cesspool. How many of these kinds of factories are there? In North Carolina alone, there are over 2,000, and the consequences are disastrous.
The waste falls through the floors. It's flushed out into an open pit, like a cesspool. It's easy for a big hog operation to have as much waste as a medium-sized city. Of course, the pit will fill up, so it has to be emptied, and they're emptied by spraying the liquid waste.
Yes, you heard that right.
If you're familiar with a garden sprayer, they're gigantic versions of that. So they're making droplets, fine mists out of this liquid waste, and that can drift downwind into the neighboring communities.
I shut my hog operation down when I got out of it. And I I just couldn't do another person that way to make them smell bad. It is a cesspool that you put feces and urine in, a hole in the ground that you dump a toxic waste in. And I've seen dead hogs in them and stuff like that.
People can't open their windows. They can't go outside.
I've seen it. I've talked to the people. I've seen the little children. They say, Mom and Daddy, why we got to smell this stuff? You get stories like, I can't hang my clothes out. Feces and urine odor comes by and attaches itself to your clothes. And then people will say, well, scared to invite neighbors.
It can, I think, very correctly be called environmental racism or environmental injustice, that people of color, low-income people, bear the brunt of these practices.
This is where they spray animal waste on us. This is about 8 feet from my mother's house.
What is it like when the mist is?
It's like, you think it's raining? Yeah. You think it's raining. We don't open the doors or the windows, but the odor still comes in. It takes your breath away. Then you start gagging, you get headaches.
There are a number of studies of asthma and asthma symptoms, particularly in children near these facilities. Among adults, there are reports of several types of upper respiratory symptoms. These pollutants are affecting people's blood pressure.
Who's responsible for all this? Smithfield Foods, specifically the subdivision Murphy Brown, which controls the factory farms shown in all of the drone footage in this video. Smithfield is by far the largest pork producer in the entire world. And inside these buildings, there is something else entirely. Pigs are really intelligent animals. They are more intelligent than dogs. They are more intelligent than cats. In the average pig barn, there could be hundreds, if not thousands, of pigs crammed into this one sprawling indoor space. Their entire life is spent standing on concrete floors. Mother pigs are locked in metal cages so small that they literally cannot even turn around for months at a time. This is not a partisan issue. We are all opposed to children being made sick, to animals being abused, and to everyday people's lives being ruined by the stench of cesspools in their backyards. These thousands of lakes of toxic waste must be among the most bizarre and disturbing environmental phenomena that have ever confronted America. And they've been kept well hidden from the public for long enough.
All of this poop also contributes to climate change. A report from the UN Food and Agriculture Organization revealed that animal agriculture accounts for more greenhouse gases than the entire transportation sector combined. That's more than all the planes, trains, and automobiles all added up together. Part of the reason is that animals, especially cows, directly emit greenhouse gases. They burp methane, and their poop releases nitrous oxide. Methane is 20 times worse for the climate than carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide is up to 300 times worse for climate change than carbon dioxide. So what's coming out of cows is up to 300 times worse than what's coming out of our cars. Combine that with the fossil fuels required to grow the corn and soy, and factor in all of the deforestation, and meat's huge carbon footprint starts to make sense. Now that you have an overview of how factory farming affects the environment, its role in emerging infectious diseases such as COVID-19 will become quite clear. According to the United Nations, there are 5 major factors that contribute to the spread of emerging diseases. Animal agriculture plays a major role in every single one of them. First, because of deforestation, humans and livestock are becoming more and more exposed to diseases that used to only be found in wildlife, such as bats. Livestock can easily become infected with the diseases from these wild animals and then spread the disease to humans. Climate change also accelerates the evolution of these new pathogens, making it easier for them to infect new hosts like livestock and humans. Third, when we change the land from forest, or whatever else, to feedlots, we kill and displace wildlife and reduce biodiversity. The reduction in biodiversity also amplifies the likelihood of disease spread. Evidence suggests that as climate change gets worse and humans continue to encroach upon wildlife, the spread of diseases such as COVID-19 will become more frequent. Cuteness interlude.